All right, this is the last section for Module D. We're going to talk about converting fractions into decimals. So in order to do this, we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. The top will go inside, the bottom goes outside. If there is a whole number, include it with the decimal part. We'll look at some problems like this in a few minutes. Okay, so let's start with example A. We want to convert 5/8 into a decimal. So we're going to set up our division problem. I'm going to put 5 inside the division and 8 will go outside. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to add a decimal point as well as a 0. And then we can go ahead and start our divisions. So the first number that is divisible by 8 is 50. 50 divided by 8. 8 goes into 50 6 times. 6 times 8 is 48. If we subtract, we get 2. We need to add a 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 20 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. Subtract, we get 4. Repeat the process. We're going to add a 0, bring it down. 8 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. Subtract, we get 0, and we are done with our divisions. Last thing we need to do is move our decimal point up into our answer. So we get 5/8 is equal to 0.625. All right, so this is an example of a terminating. Let's look at a couple other ones. Let's look at B. B, we have 10 over 11, and I want to write this as a decimal. So I'm going to start by putting 10 inside the decimal house and 11 outside. I'm also going to go ahead and add a decimal point and a 0. From here, we want to go ahead and divide. 100 by 11. 11 goes into 100 9 times. We get 9 times 11 is 99. Subtract, we get 1. We go ahead and add a 0, bring it down. How many times does 11 go into 10? It does not. So we're going to put a 0 on top. I'm not going to multiply, instead I'm going to add a 0, bring it down. And if you notice now, we're kind of repeating the same process. Since we were not told to round, I'm going to go ahead and write this answer exactly. So I'm going to bring my decimal point up, and I'm going to put a bar over the digits that are repeating. And the two digits that are going to be repeating are 0.90, or the 90. So my final answer is 0.90 with a bar. All right, last example. We have 3/7, and I want to round to the nearest thousandth. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 3 inside my decimal house, my 7 outside. Thousandths means 3 decimal places. And recall that we want to not only have thousands, but we want to have one more so we know how it rounds. All right, so let's see what happens. We're going to divide 7 into 30. That goes in 4 times. 4 times 7 is 28. Subtract, we get 2. We bring down our 7 goes into 20. 2 times. 2 times 7 is 14. Subtract, we get 6. we bring down a 0. 7 goes into 60 8 times. 8 times 7 is 56. Subtract, we get 4. And finally, we bring down our 0. 7 goes into 40 5 times. 5 times 7 is 35. Subtract, we get 5. We don't really care because at this point we are done. We're going to bring up our decimal point. From here, I want to go ahead and look at how I'm going to round this. So 8 is in the thousandths place. 5 tells me that I want to round up. So this is going to equal 0.429. All right, so that takes care of some basic fractions. So now let's go ahead and look at some mixed numbers. Now there's a couple different ways, there's two different ways that you can do this. Okay, the first way that you can do this is you can go ahead and convert to an improper fraction. So many of you might think let's do that first, and so let's go ahead and do that first. So if I convert 4 3/5 into an improper fraction, we're going to multiply 5 times 4 is 20, plus 3 is 23 over 5. All right, I've got a fraction now. This is in fraction form, so we can go ahead and divide. So I'm going to divide 23. I'm going to put my number on top inside. I'm going to put my bottom number outside. All right, 5 goes into 23 4 times. 4 times 5 is 20. Subtract, we get 3. I add a decimal point and a 0 because I'm going to have to bring it down. And we get 5 goes into 30 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30. We have our 0. And I can go ahead and move my decimal point up into my answer. So that's one way you can do this. Now, this is a little repetitive because we already know that the whole number is 4. Whether it's in mixed number form or decimal form, the number before the decimal point has to be 4. So what we can do is, instead of working with the whole thing, the whole 4 3/5, what we can do is just work with the fraction part. Now, if I wrote this fraction as a decimal, I'm just going to work with the 3/5. I'm going to tack on my 4 in the end. So I'm going to do 3 divided by 5. I'm going to add my point 0. 5 goes into 30 6 times. 6 times 5 is 30. Subtract, we get 0. And so what we get is the fraction part, just the 3/5, is equal to 0.6. Now, if we want 4 3/5, then this is going to equal 4.6. So you can do it either way. As I said, if you convert to an improper fraction, it's just a little redundant. You're just going to have to add in at least an extra step in order to convert it into a decimal. All right, let's look at one more. Let's look at 2 7/9. So I'm going to go ahead and just work with 7/9, and then I'll tack on my whole number in the end. So I'm going to divide 7 by 9. I add a decimal point, I add a 0. 9 goes into 70 7 times. We get 7 times 9 is 63. Subtract, we get 7. And hopefully you notice right away we're going to have a repetition. So 7/9 is actually equal to 0.7 repeating. So I'm going to put 0.7 with the bar. So now what is 2 7/9? Well, if 7/9 is 7 with the bar, I'm going to take my whole number and I'm going to tack it onto the front, and we get 2.7 repeating. And that takes care of converting fractions into decimals.